And then there were 8. We are down to I guess we could say the Elite 8. It's not really that in football, but the final 8 teams left in the NFL, all vying for a big win in a Super Bowl championship this year. Erik joins me as he has each and every week, for the last 4 or 5 years. And we're here, Erik. A couple surprises, but honestly, 5 of the 6 games in wild card weekend ended in double-digit victories. We really only had that Sunday night game that was a good, entertaining game. Maybe 1 or 2 surprises. You and I like the Texans. That wasn't really a big surprise for us. Kind of thought the Chargers were a little maybe overvalued, beat up on some poor opponents, but we didn't really get the great games last weekend. Maybe this weekend with the 4 games, we can get a little bit more competitive ones because a lot of those games were over pretty early.
Yeah, really a lackluster weekend, to say the least.
Yeah.
But, is what it is. And, weird stuff, some turnovers in the Packers game, a lot of Packers guys dropping like flies. So
we will see this weekend and then generally the next weekend with the 4 are the games that are a little more competitive. We feel like we have the best teams kind of in this clump now. Last weekend, we didn't have the 2 number 1 seeds, but we'll start off on Saturday with one of them, with the Chiefs hosting the Houston Texans. So as it sits right now, Kansas City hasn't played in 23 days. They were able to clinch earlier. They're attempting their three-peat right now. And what we've seen from them, a lot of the early part of the year, they were getting kind of lucky. I mean, they're a good team. They would put themselves in spots to win, and a lot of the either-or plays, a lot of the bounces that could go one way or the other were going their way. And that happened a few times. They're better than teams like the Vikings from a few years ago or the Eagles from last year that were just getting all those lucky wins, because this is more of a proven team. Their defense is solid. We know they've been there. They've done that. But they did seem to improve towards the end of the year, get a little bit more dominant. What I still worry about with this team, Erik, though, the Chiefs, and when they're like a big favorite like this, is they don't have as many of those playmakers. And, last year it was Rice who was awesome in the playoffs, and it was Rice and Kelsey who they leaned on again. You could see Mahomes in his last few weeks of playing trying to get guys like Hopkins and Worthy and some of these guys like a little more comfortable with him, but I still don't know if they have enough of those players that Mahomes feels really comfortable with. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to play this game overall, but I already locked in Texans first half, because what I liked in watching the Texans last week, first 5 drives, they had 44 total yards, 3 punts, 2 turnovers. They looked horrible. Then that one play that Stroud made was 3rd and 16, ended up leading them on a 99-yard drive, and including that, they score on 5 of 7 drives before running out the clock. They go 99 yards, 45 yards, 44 yards, 46 yards. And for the second year in a row, they get an upset. Can they beat the Chiefs? I don't know. I definitely locked in the first half, Erik, on the Texans, with the possibility of Kansas City being a little sleepy, being off, taking a little while to get warmed up, and the Texans finding themselves late in the game. They have a good defense. I think they'll be able to put a little bit of pressure on Mahomes. So I'm thinking they can keep this game close early. Do you think they can keep it close throughout?
I have the same bet. I did 2 bets in this game. I did the Texans plus first half. My worry is that the Texans' lack of weapons will kind of show up in the second half. My thought process in the first half: Texans 13-4 ATS first half this season, best in the league. During Ryan's tenure at Houston, the Texans are 26-11 ATS in the first half, including 3-0 in the playoffs. Stroud is 26-9 ATS in the first half. Texans first half have a top 10 offense, 4th in time of possession. You mentioned it. They're really good at the scripted part of the games. Chiefs haven't played a game in 21 days. Therefore, obviously a rust factor. 1 seeds in the divisional round are 39.5% ATS in the first half. When we look at the body of work for the first half, Stroud actually has better stat lines than Mahomes. One thing the Texans do great is rushing the quarterbacks. The tackles for the Chiefs, the weakness of the offensive line. Taylor, PFF graded 59.9, making him 61 out of 81 right tackles on the season. Humphreys at left tackle hasn't played enough snaps, but he's graded at 44.8. Texans defensively have been great this season, 2 DVOA, third best against the passive run. Chiefs offense is a timing-based offense. I think it could start out a little bit slow. Also, I know Watson is coming back. When we look at it, statistically speaking, this is a great matchup for Nico Collins, because the Chiefs are 26 DVOA defending wide receiver ones, and Stroud targets him a lot. I just like the angle, playing a team, fading a team, hasn't played for 21 games, basically, and a good first half team. So I played them first half plus 5.5. And I also did Dalton Schultz over 34.5 receiving yards. Chiefs have given up the most yards to tight ends this season, allowing 70.1 per game. When we just take out the Broncos game, because let's face it, no one was really playing that game. 8 of the last 10 tight ends that have faced the Chiefs have gone over this total. The only ones that did it were Jordan Akins for the Browns, who finished with 30 yards, and Trutman from the Broncos, who had 34. During that 10-game run, those 10 tight ends averaged 51 yards per game. Schultz last game, 5 for 45. Schultz this season, second on the team in targets and receptions, third in yards. Second on the team in targets last week against the Chargers. Strover, who's their other tight end, just went on IR. They released Deontay Johnson. This Texans team is just low on playmakers, and Schultz is going to have to be a factor in this passing game. And we look at how bad the Chiefs are defending the middle of the field. They're probably going to bracket coverage Nico Collins. So I like Schultz to go over the 34.5. I bet that as well.
Yeah, I like the way you were pointing out how there's angles and kind of matchups on this game that we like a little bit. Like the angle of the team that hasn't played for a long time. They're a little bit, maybe possibly rusty. They've sat, guys on top of the weeks they had off for KC. You have the matchup with the defensive line in particular of the Texans, and the fact that the Texans they seem like they found something a little bit on offense last week. You pointed out how good they are first half. So lots of little things to like them in that first half spot there. So hopefully they can keep that game close early on. Focus in on Schultz there for Erik. Anything else you want to hit on this game? Got to give 2 positives for KC, though, because when you and I, unfortunately, aren't going to be playing Kansas City or giving Kansas City out very often on shows like this, because most of the time they're going to be favored and probably overly valued in as a chalk team that teams want to keep betting on. But watching some of their numbers tick up as they continue to win, like Mahomes is 6-0 in the divisional round. He has a chance to make his 7th AFC championship game before turning 30. And Andy Reid is 29-3 coming off the bye. So just some monster numbers for a team that just knows how to win. We're hoping we can catch them sleeping a little bit in the first half, and maybe that's how you can take advantage and get a little value here. Erik, we move to your Lions hosting the Washington Commanders. So the Lions got the bye, and now they are the number 1 seed. They are favored heading into trying to get to the Super Bowl. So the Lions, we know what their issues are. How healthy are they going to be? Because 3 or 4 weeks ago, it started to look like they might be getting to the point of no return, Erik, with some of the defensive injuries they had. But they made it through. They kind of weathered the storm. They got the bye that they needed. And now they're going to get some weapons back. They already got 1 or 2 back last week. They're going to get Montgomery back offensively. So the defense should just be a little more shored up. And I think the real key in this game is going to be more about the offense, because for Detroit, if you were mapping out teams that they wanted to match up with, it would be this Washington team, because Washington does not have a good defense. They did not have a good defense throughout the year. In fact, they were 3rd worst in the league defending the run. And if you just think about how the Lions can pound with Montgomery now back and Gibbs, it just feels like an awful matchup for the Lions or for the Commanders. And even if the Lions are struggling a bit defensively, they should be able to move the ball as much as they'd like, in particular on the ground, I think, in this matchup.
When this was a real tough for me, because on one side of the ball, we have the Lions, 1 seeds. Historically speaking, 1 seeds struggle in this game. 34% ATS in the divisional round. When the line is 8 or higher, it dips down to 33. Per DVOA, the Lions have been a great defense, top 5, allowing 20.6 points per game. But when we've played a top 10 offense per DVOA, which the Commanders are, that ticks up to 26.6 DVOA. Are they going to be able to get enough stops? And more importantly, stops at enough time. We look at the Lions secondary, really hit and miss. Joseph and Branch are elite, but they play safety. Darnold, he got hurt last game. What is his situation going to be? Robertson has struggled this year, but he is coming off the game of his life where he checked Justin Jefferson one-on-one.
It was awesome.
Is he going to be able to do that against Terry McLaurin, or is that just a one-time thing? I don't know. If I was a betting man, I would say no. Also, the Lions gave up the 4th most rushing yards per game to opposing quarterbacks, Are they going to be able to stop Jaden Daniels in the rush game? Other side, Commanders have struggled defensively all year. Are they going to be able to stop the Lions, who scored the most points per game, arguably the best offense in the league? Campbell, one of the best coaches, ATS, 53, 29, and 1. That's 64.6% ATS. As a favorite, he's 23, 13, and 1, 67. When it's 3.5 or more, 17 and 8, 68% ATS. Also, when did the Lions decide to sit on the ball and just run it? You know what I mean? Like, are the Commanders going to be able to get stops? But at the end of the day, for me, this just comes down to fourth down variance.
Both these teams are going for it, right?
Going for it a lot. Lions, 4th most this year. Commanders, 13th. But the thing with the Commanders, 20 for 23 on the season. Best ever in the history of the league. 3 of 5 last week.
And I think they kind of know that they're the dog. Yeah. And they're kind of playing like, hey, we're the underdog. If we're going to win these games, we got to go for it on 4th down.
The league average is 51%. They're due for a game where they go
regression.
They're due for some regression.
1 for 6, something like that, right? Yeah.
But I mean, like, historically speaking, 15, 27, and 1, 35.7% ATS, the 1 seeds are. I mean, I know it's going back and forth between 9 and 9.5. For me to get invested in this game on a side, I'll have to get to the 10. But I do have 2 player props that I bet. First player prop, Austin Eckler, over 22.5 receiving yards. Lions are 29th DVOA to funding the running back in the passing game. Lions give up the 15th most yards per game to opposing running backs in the passing attack, allowing 34.8 yards per game. The last 4 running backs against the Lions, Aaron Jones, 30 yards. Isaac Guerrero, 65. DeAndre Swift, 33. And then the Bills game, James Cook had 28, but Ty Johnson had 114 yards. So all 4 running backs have gone over this total. Eckler, 4 for 26 last game. Eckler has gone over this total 7 of 13 games this season he's played. Also, Robinson, really bad last week. Really, really bad. Like, didn't look good at all. No explosive.
No, look really bad. I agree.
This is a negative game script. We could see an uptick in Eckler's snap count just because he's a better in pass pro and he's better in the pass catching game.
And in like a 1-game sample, like Eckler isn't someone I think anymore that you probably want to draft in like a year-long fantasy situation. But if the guy's healthy in a 1-game sample size, he's super versatile too. Like, you know, you just don't know if he's a smaller back, so he's tough to have and to count on as like your number 1 back throughout the year.
Plus
right?
He provides, this is a big game for the Commanders, very young roster, provides some veteran leadership.
Experience, exactly.
There is going to be big.
Yep.
And then I also did Samuel Laporta, over 46.5 yards receiving. Commanders, 26 DVOA defending opponents' tight ends. He's gone over this total 4 of his last 5 games to close the season. During that time frame, he's averaging 7.8 targets, 5.8 receptions, 67 yards per game. Bobby Wagner for the Commanders, who covers a tight end, has a PFF grade of 66 in coverage, and he isn't 100%. He's been missing practice. So then the guy that covers the tight end is bad at covering the tight end. Now you have his backup covering the tight end. That's just kind of
How bad is he?
The whole Ben Johnson offense is designed to attack the middle of the field. That's where St. Brown and Laporta live. And another key thing about Laporta, who did have a bad season, was down. We did hit his under prop for receiving yards. He's just been banged up. If you just look at the games he's been healthy, he was going to have another season where he had over 1,000 yards. I think now that he's healthy, he is going to be a big part of this passing attack. And if you're Dan Quinn, aren't you going to kind of sell out to stop the run? And that's going to open more stuff up over the middle of the field.
Yeah.
So, I just did Laporta over the 46.5 yards receiving. This is a weird week. Like right now, with how these lines are, I'm just on a lot of player props.
The two number one seeds are between 9 and 10 point favorites in these first two games that we're talking about. So a little bit tricky there. With this game, the one thing I had to do a write-up for work where they asked me to give a play in each game. It could have been side or total. In this game was the one I was having the toughest time with. I ended up going over, but I can totally see this game being a situation where both teams are just scoring on each other. Like that's the weaknesses of right now that we're looking at for both of these teams. But what scares me about that, Erik, in that like assessment is both of these teams can go on really long drives. Washington does it all the time where they go on these really long drives and they just keep picking up first downs. And if that happens once or twice, then you're just done with an over. Then you're just in like real trouble if they both go on these elongated drives. So, this was a tricky game here, but do feel like both teams should be able to score a little bit. It's just, I don't think Washington can get the stops here. Like you said, for them, they're going to have to pick a strategy and sell out in one way or the other and say, we're going to try to just take this completely away from them because personnel-wise, they just don't seem like they have the guys on defense to match up with the guys on offense that the Lions have.
But I mean, if this does get to 10,
then absolutely, right? Could you be in a situation where the Lions are up by 16 and you get a garbage time score late from Daniels? Absolutely, right? So I agree with you. 10 would be the point where I would buy in on Washington. I just couldn't get there at this big of a number with the Lions laying it because of all the backdoor possibility and because of Washington's offense can score. And like we said, one or two more injuries on the Lions defense. Okay, now they could really start if one of the two or the key guys gets banged up here again. Couple player props in this one for Erik, and then we will move to Sunday. Let's talk about, we go from your Lions, who, if they get the win, could possibly play my Rammies if they got the win. But the Rammies have a tough task. They got to go on the road and play against the Eagles. This game is now up to Philadelphia -6. So a couple things to point out for the Rams, who they started out this year, again, really bad. 1-4 last year. They were 3-6. They didn't get to 500 until December. And then they had that big win, 44-42 over the Bills. Since that game, when the Rams allowed 44 points, their defense, their starters have played in 4 games, and they've allowed a total of 33. They shut down a top 10 offense in the Vikings last week. One note that I thought was kind of fascinating. Stafford in December, January, and February games with the Rams is 19-3 as a starter with the Rams. They have not lost a lot of games. And when the grouping of the 4 guys of Stafford, Nakua, Kupp, and Kyron Williams are all playing together, they're 15-5. This is a good team when they're healthy offensively, Erik. Where they struggled and where we weren't sure about them was defensively. And one of the reasons why they've improved as the season has gone on, their defense is young, especially the guys up front. They've got a lot of first-year and second-year players. So these guys improve a lot as the season goes on. They learn, they figure things out. They just get better and they take big leaps. With the way that Philadelphia's offense has been playing, just not quite dominant. Their passing game hasn't really been dominant. We saw last week they kind of struggled to get the passing game going. They've been leaning on the run a little bit more. They're a team that's fine going on long drives themselves. I think the Rams can keep this game close. And at 6, for sure, I'm on the Rams side. Once it got into the above 4 range, I was leaning more Rams because I do think this will be like a back and forth close kind of game. I think it could be absolutely a field goal game. I'm not sure if the Rams can win, but I much prefer this matchup in this game than the Lions, who the Rams a couple times have kind of had a tough time with. I'd love to wait and have to play the Lions next week if possible. What do you think? Can my Rammies keep this game close? Can they get the job done, or are you on the Eagles side here?
Another interesting game. We have the Rams coming off a short week where their game was moved to Zona, so they had to fly from LA to Zona, then back to LA.
And all the fire stuff going on too, right? Like, who knows what's that going to do to them?
Will be 36%, 30 degrees, but McVay is 69.5% ATS on short rest. Great game plan last week from the Rams as they really didn't run the ball. A lot of play action, get the ball out of Stafford's hands fast to avoid the Vikings pass rush. But I feel that won't be the case here. The Rams will look to run the ball more. What the heck is going on with Cooper Kupp? Zero factor. Could be a bounce back here as Puka Nacua will get the coverage from Dijon and Mitchell, leaving Slay, who's banged up, on Kupp. Another side, Rams run zone coverage heavy. Hurts really struggles against zone coverage. Holds the ball too long, leads to sacks. When you look at all the quarterbacks, when you look at their stats, zone coverage compared to man coverage, the biggest differential, the biggest difference is Hurts. He really does struggle against this. AJ Brown, knee isn't 100%, which really steps out. Also, AJ Brown, I don't know if you heard that story. That book, he has completely changed that guy's life. That was 500,000
on the bestseller, and now everyone's buying it. It went up all the ratings. And, I saw the comments.
Yeah,
that's hilarious.
That guy went $90,000 in debt to write that book. So great story.
Wow, that's cool, man. I like hearing stuff like that. But you're pointing out a lot of the little things, right? Like AJ Brown a little banged up. We still don't know about Hurts and his 100% health coming off of some of the issues that he's had, and they just haven't been all that potent as an offense. And I think you're spot on in that the Rams, and I'm hoping McVay, he's just a good coach and he's really smart about, hey, we had to attack this opponent last week this way. We're going to attack this opponent in a different way this week because that's our best chance. That's the best opportunity to slow this game down, try to run the ball.
And then, this comes down to whoever runs the ball more. The factor, I think this is going to be a run-heavy attack from the Eagles based on the two factors I just said about them, is the Rams defense, which is 21st DVOA defending the run, allowing 128.7 yards per game, the 21st most in the league, get stops against one of the best offensive lines in the league. I don't know. Historically speaking, this is the round of back dogs, 59% ATS the last 20 years. You have a veteran quarterback in Stafford, a Super Bowl winning coach McVay. Eagles offense hasn't looked right against the Packers. When we look at just the box score, Packers, more first downs, more yards, more total plays. The difference, the 4 turnovers. Packers lost Jenkins, best offensive lineman, and in my eyes, their best player, and his backup. So they had the third string guard in there. Love running for his life. You had no Watson. Reed left the game early. Dobbs left the game early. So the Packers just had all these injuries, and they still hung in there for the most part, and they just had 4 turnovers. To me, if this gets to 7, that is my buy-in point. What I did in this game is I did bet Dallas Galbert, over 33.5 yards. Rams give up the 4th most yards per game to opposing tight ends, allowing 64.8 per game. 8 of the last tight ends they've played have gone over this number, averaging 53.8 yards per game. Dallas has gone over this total his last 3 games in that time frame, 3.7 receptions per game, 45.7 yards per game. So I just like this matchup. I think he's going to factor into the passing game, especially with Brown a little bit banged up, a lot more underneath stuff. So I did him over 33.5 yards.
See if we can get the Rammies in an upset, the Lions in a win, and next week we'd play each other for a chance to go to the Super Bowl. I think the Rams can keep this game close. Erik, with a couple more props here in this one. Anything else you want to hit on? I mean, got to give them some credit, though. Fangio has been phenomenal this year with the Eagles defense. Since their bye in week 5, they've allowed 14.6 points per game, only 255 yards. They've won 13 out of the last 14 games. You know, they're been really, really good form right now. But for a team that's favored by margin, couple small things to point on, matchups that we hit on. Maybe the dog can get the job done, and a couple of Erik's props there. I'd say that the game that probably the most people are looking forward to is the Sunday night football game, where you have the Bills and the Ravens, who have both felt like Super Bowl contenders this year. You have the matchup of everyone's kind of assuming whoever wins this will get to go play Kansas City. Don't want to just discount the Texans right off the bat, though. But Baltimore on the road, heading to the Bills. Basically a pick 'em here. Baltimore slight favorite, 1-point favorite on the road. So a couple things to point on for the Ravens first. They have won 5 in a row, all by at least 14 points. And one of the key changes for this team was the defense. They were bad early on in the year. Defense was one of the worst defenses in the league, like through week 5 or so. Since week 14, including the playoffs, their defense ranks number 1 in EPA allowed per play, defensive success rate, drop back EPA, drop back success rate, rushing success rate, and they rank 4th in EPA allowed, rushing EPA allowed. So all of the major defensive metrics, they're first, and then they're 4th in one of them. The defense in the last 8 games, they've moved from allowing 360 plus yards per game to just 260 plus yards per game. And one of the major adjustments, Kyle Hamilton, using him more as a safety. Now he's playing 2/3 of his snaps as a safety since week 11. We saw them last week, Erik, in the playoffs, lose to the Chiefs in a game when they only rushed for 16 times for 81 yards, and the running backs only had 6 carries. You just don't think that's going to happen with this team this year with the Lamar and Henry combination. We saw Henry get leaned on in that last game. He had 26 carries. They ran for 299 yards. And remember, they set the all-time record for yards per rush for a team, 5.76 yards per rush. So earlier in the year, their defense was struggling. Their defense is much improved now. They made some adjustments. Even the kicking game, we were worried about Tucker, but he's hit his last 3 field goals in his last 22 straight point after attempts. So I mean, both of these teams are good. I just think Baltimore's a little bit more well-rounded. I'm trusting their defense a little bit more now. I think they have a few more options for playmakers. But man, I could see anybody going either way with these two teams in what's going to be an awesome game. How about for you, Erik? Talk to us. I didn't really hit on the Bills very much, but talk to us about more about this game and what you're thinking.
Game of the year potential. Really hope that we get a good game. Hope it lives up to the hype. Interesting thing about this one, and this is my first bet. Lamar Jackson in the last 20 years is the best quarterback ATS in the first half. Josh Allen the last 20 years is the best quarterback in the second half ATS.
I like that. That's cool.
So it's 8-1 for the Ravens to be leading at halftime.
And Bills win.
Bills win. So I put pizza money on that just for a fun little prop bet.
That's one that Cousin Sam does with the Steelers all the time, because that had been good success the last couple of years with the Steelers. You bet against them in the first half, and then the Steelers to win the game. Yeah. I like that kind of a parlay. So yeah, that's an interesting one. That's unique.
To me, this game comes down to the Bills. Can they stop the run?
Yep.
8th DVOA against the run, but they did allow 113 yards per game. The last game, the Ravens rushed for 271 yards and are averaging 193.8 yards per game, most in the league. Ravens struggled defending the middle of the field. Hamilton is banged up. That's where Shakir lives. Leads the Bills targets, receptions, yards. Bills defense has been elite in this year in the red zone, not giving up touchdowns. But to me, I look at a stat like that, I'm like, okay, they're due for a game for some regression. I'm a big regression better. Bills have a run-heavy team, and are they going to be able to be successful against the Ravens, who have allowed 77.2 yards per game, the least in the league, and DVOA fourth best against the run. This is an interesting matchup, and unless this really blows up to 2.5 or 3, I'm just not going to get involved. I'm going to look to just bet this live because there's going to be opportunities to get plus money on both.
Yep. Whoever gets down early.
Yep. So I'm going to bet the prop, Ravens first half, Bills game. And then I also did Justice Hill over 21.5 receiving yards. The Bills give up the most yards per game to opposing running backs in the passing game, allowing 44 yards per game. They're 21st DVOA against the running backs in the passing game. 11 running backs this season have gone over this 21.5 yard total. Those 11 are averaging 53 yards per game. Last game, Hill, 78 yards against them. And the one thing that's really stood out to me is any negative game script. Anytime the Ravens are struggling or it's a passing down, Derrick Henry's nowhere to be found. He's on the sidelines. Justice Hill is there. And Zay Flowers hasn't been practicing. He's still banged up. If he's not there and they need to pass the ball, I'm just going to be going into, hey, you know what? They need to use him to move the ball in the air. So, yeah, I like Justice Hill. It's one of those weird weeks. It's usually for me, it's more sides, a couple player props. This week with how the lines are, I'm kind of just doing a lot of player props. If this gets to 3, I'll be on the Bills. If the Rams get to 7, I'll be on the Rams. If the Commanders get to 10, I'll be on the Commanders. Texans, I played the first half. Honestly, I'm tempted to play them for the game, but I don't really know if I want to double dip.
Erik and I will hang out on Saturday. Did we talk about Saturday morning yet?
We haven't come up with a time yet.
What works for you Saturday? You want to do, what did we do last week? We did noon?
You name it, I'll be ready.
Yeah, we'll do noon Eastern on Saturday. We'll hit the 2 games. We'll give you a boom fantasy lineup. We'll give you some first time touchdown props for there. And we'll have any last minute injury news, any last minute line movement on those games. Then Sunday, 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time, NFL betting blitz. Just a couple more weeks left in the NFL. We're recording on Thursday morning. So Erik, you'll have your normal Friday podcast coming up, preview and everything for the weekend.
Yep.
Looking forward to it. Everyone out there, best of luck. If you're watching on YouTube, if you can, subscribe to the YouTube channel below. Thanks so much for doing that. And we'll talk to you a little later this week when we preview the games on Saturday.